The blackened remains of the UES Dauntless smoldered in space, its twisted wreckage spinning lifelessly through the void as pulses of plasma fire from the Cardassian warships continued to tear into the hull. Alone on the planet's surface below, Captain Derek Johnson took cover behind a lifepod hatch and watched his former ship die its final death. In the back of his mind, he knew that the destruction of the Dauntless marked the start of a new war, and humanity would rain blood across the stars until the galaxy understood their place in it. It should have been a routine mission. The uncharted world had only been marked for a brief survey, but the Cardassian ambush came out of nowhere. Derek's ship never stood a chance against their barrage of torpedoes. He'd barely managed to give the order to evacuate before the Dauntless broke apart. In those frantic final moments, he'd steeled himself to go down fighting, content to die taking as many of the alien bastards with him as he could. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Now he was marooned with only a rifle and the burning drive to avenge his crew. The Cardassians thought they could murder his men without consequence. They believed themselves the masters of the galaxy, and humanity just another civilization to absorb into their empire. Derek would make them pay for that arrogance. The Cardassians would come to curse the day they turned their guns on humankind. He would bring the wrath of Earth and its colonies down on their reptilian heads, even if he had to hijack one of their damned ships himself to do it. The Cardassians believed this attack would be the end of humanity as a threat. Derek swore he'd show them it was only the beginning. Derek's boots crunched on the scorched earth as he surveyed the desolate landscape. The ruins of the Cardassian outpost loomed before him, the twisted metal structures bearing the scars of some ancient battle. He approached cautiously, his rifle at the ready, alert for any signs of movement. The outpost appeared long abandoned, but he knew better than to let his guard down on a hostile alien world. As he picked his way through the debris, Derek's eyes were drawn to a partially collapsed hangar. Amid the rubble, he spotted the distinctive shape of a Cardassian scout ship. His heart raced as he approached the vessel, hoping against hope that it might still be operational. The ship was damaged, its hull pitted with scorch marks, but it seemed largely intact. Derek clambered inside, his fingers flying over the control panels as he assessed the damage. To his surprise, the ship's basic systems were still functional. The cloaking device and short-range communications array were operational, albeit in need of some repairs. Derek set to work, his technical expertise guiding his hands as he patched up the damaged components. As he worked, he intercepted a burst of Cardassian transmissions. The voices were garbled, but he managed to make out a few key words. Supply depot. Commander Karos. Repairs. A plan began to form in Derek's mind. If he could infiltrate the Cardassian supply depot, he could strike a blow against the enemy and throw their fleet into disarray. With the scout ship's cloaking device, he could slip in undetected and wreak havoc on their ships and equipment. It was a daring plan, but Derek was a man with nothing left to lose. Under the cover of the scout ship's cloak, Derek approached the supply depot. The sprawling complex was bustling with activity, Cardassian soldiers and technicians swarming over the docked ships. Derek landed the scout ship in a secluded corner of the depot and slipped out, his rifle slung over his shoulder. He moved like a ghost through the shadows, planting explosive charges on the enemy vessels and sabotaging their repair equipment. But as he worked, a shout rang out across the depot. Derek spun around to see a group of Cardassian soldiers bearing down on him, their weapons drawn. He cursed under his breath and took off running, weaving between the ships as plasma bolts sizzled past his head. The game of cat and mouse had begun. Derek ducked and dodged, using the ships and equipment as cover as he tried to evade his pursuers. But the Cardassians were relentless, their numbers growing with each passing moment. Just as Derek thought he might be overwhelmed, a figure emerged from the shadows ahead of him. It was Commander Karos himself, his reptilian features twisted into a snarl of rage. The two adversaries circled each other warily, their eyes locked in a fierce stare. Then, with a roar, Karos lunged forward, his fists flying. Derek met him head-on, the two warriors trading blows in a brutal display of raw physical power. They pummeled each other mercilessly, their blood spattering the ground as they fought. In the end, it was Derek who emerged victorious. He stood over the battered and beaten form of Karos, his chest heaving with exertion. For a moment, he considered ending the Cardassian's life then and there, but something stayed his hand. He knew that Karos's humiliation would send a far stronger message to the Cardassian Empire than his death ever could. With the supply depot in chaos and Karos's fleet crippled, Derek made his escape. He climbed back into the scout ship and engaged the cloaking device, slipping away from the depot like a wraith. As he set a course for the nearest human outpost, Derek allowed himself a grim smile. The Cardassians had started this war, but he would be the one to finish it. Humanity would rise from the ashes of this defeat, stronger and more determined than ever before, and the galaxy would tremble before their might. Derek's scout ship dropped out of warp near the UEF outpost on Proxima Centauri, the closest human colony to Earth. As he approached the planet, his heart sank at the sight before him. A massive Cardassian warship loomed in orbit, its plasma cannons relentlessly pounding the outpost's shields. The once pristine settlement was now a smoldering ruin, its buildings reduced to rubble by the onslaught of Cardassian firepower. Derek activated the ship's cloaking device and slipped past the Cardassian behemoth, making his way to the outpost's landing pad. As he disembarked, he was greeted by a grim-faced UEF officer, Colonel Jake Martinez. "Captain Johnson," Martinez said, clasping Derek's hand in a firm grip. "We thought you were dead. What's the situation out there?" "It's bad," Derek replied, his voice heavy with fatigue. "The Cardassians ambushed the Dauntless. I'm the only survivor, and from what I've seen, they're launching a full-scale invasion of our space." Martinez nodded grimly. "We're barely holding on here. That Cardassian ship has been pounding us for hours. We need to take it out if we're going to have any chance of evacuating the outpost." Derek's mind raced, analyzing the tactical situation. "I have an idea," he said. "I managed to steal a Cardassian scout ship. With its cloaking device, I can get a strike team aboard that warship. We can take it down from the inside." Martinez's eyes widened. "That's a hell of a risk, Captain. But it might be our only shot. I'll assemble a team of our best fighters. You lead the way." An hour later, Derek and his hand-picked squad of UEF commandos stood in the armory, gearing up for the mission. They donned state-of-the-art exoskeleton armor, the powered suits enhancing their strength and speed. Plasma rifles hummed in their hands, the weapon's energy cells glowing with deadly potential. As the strike team boarded the scout ship, Derek felt a surge of adrenaline. This was what he lived for, the thrill of the fight, the chance to strike back at the enemy. With a nod to Martinez, he engaged the cloaking device and launched the ship towards the waiting Cardassian warship. The infiltration went smoothly, the scout ship's cloak allowing them to approach undetected. Derek docked with the warship's airlock, and the team slipped aboard like ghosts. They moved quickly and silently through the corridors, planting explosive charges at key structural points. But as they neared the ship's reactor core, a squad of Cardassian soldiers emerged from a side passage. At their head was a familiar figure, Commander Karos, his reptilian eyes blazing with hatred. The Cardassians opened fire, plasma bolts filling the corridor. Derek and his team dove for cover, returning fire with deadly precision. The air crackled with the stench of ozone as the two sides traded blows. Derek saw an opening and took it, leading his team in a flanking maneuver that caught the Cardassians off guard. Karos snarled in frustration as his soldiers fell, cut down by the humans' superior firepower. "Fall back," Karos bellowed, his voice tinged with desperation. "Regroup at the command deck." As the Cardassians retreated, Derek knew they had only moments to act. He sprinted to the reactor core, his team close behind. They hastily planted the remaining charges, setting the timers for a cascade detonation. But as they turned to leave, a plasma bolt sizzled past Derek's head. Karos stood blocking the exit, his weapon leveled at Derek's chest. "So you're not going anywhere, human," Karos growled. "You'll die here, just like the rest of your pathetic species." Derek glanced at the timer on the charges, 30 seconds to detonation. He locked eyes with Karos, a grim smile spreading across his face. "I don't think so," he said. and with a final nod to his team, he raised his rifle and charged forward, a battle cry tearing from his throat. The two warriors clashed in a fury of plasma fire and flying fists, their armor sparking with each blow. Derek felt the ship shudder as the charges began to detonate, the reactor core destabilizing. With a final burst of strength, he shoved Karos aside and sprinted for the scout ship, his team close behind. They leapt aboard just as the warship exploded, the shockwave throwing them clear. From the view screen of the scout ship, Derek watched as the Cardassian behemoth broke apart, consumed by a blossoming fireball. The outpost was saved for now, but as he listened to the chatter on the UEF comms, his heart sank. The Cardassians were launching simultaneous attacks on human colonies across the sector, their forces overwhelming the UEF's defenses. Derek clenched his fists, a cold determination settling over him. This was only the beginning. The Cardassians thought they could crush humanity beneath their heel, but they had no idea what they were up against. Derek would rally the UEF, bring the full might of human ingenuity and courage to bear, and he would not rest until the Cardassian threat was wiped from the galaxy, forever. Derek's scout ship dropped out of hyperspace near Earth, the blue-green jewel of humanity's home system. As he guided the ship towards the UEF headquarters, his mind raced with the implications of the Cardassian invasion. The very survival of the human race hung in the balance. The scout ship touched down on the landing pad, and Derek strode into the command center, his face grim. Inside, he was greeted by a flurry of activity, officers and technicians hurrying to and fro. He made his way to the central holotable, where a group of high-ranking UEF officials were gathered. "Captain Johnson," said Admiral Hackett, the head of UEF military operations, "we've been expecting you. The situation is dire." Derek nodded, his jaw tight. "I've seen it firsthand, Admiral. The Cardassians are hitting us hard on all fronts, but I've just learned something that makes the situation even worse." He tapped a command into the holotable, and a series of images sprang to life, grainy recordings of strange insectoid ships fighting alongside the Cardassian fleet. "The Zorgons," Derek said, his voice hard. "A powerful alien race from the far reaches of the galaxy. They've formed an alliance with the Cardassians, and they're supplying them with advanced weapons and technology." The room fell silent, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Admiral Hackett leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "This changes everything," he said. "We're not just fighting the Cardassians anymore. We're up against a two-front war." Derek nodded, his mind racing. "We need to level the playing field, Admiral, and I think I know how." He brought up a star map, zooming in on a remote sector of Zorgon space. "I propose a covert mission deep into Zorgon territory. We infiltrate one of their research facilities and steal the plans for their advanced weapons. With that knowledge, we can reverse engineer their technology and give ourselves a fighting chance." The room erupted into a buzz of activity, the officers and technicians debating the merits of the plan. Admiral Hackett held up a hand, silencing the chatter. "It's a risky move, Captain," he said, "but it may be our only hope. You have my authorization to assemble a team and carry out the mission." Derek nodded, his eyes blazing with determination. "I know just the people for the job, Admiral." An hour later, Derek stood in the armory, checking the plasma rifle in his hands. Beside him, a group of elite UEF operatives geared up for the mission, including his old friend and fellow war veteran, Lieutenant Jack Harris. "Just like old times, eh, Derek?" Jack said, a grin splitting his rugged face. Derek chuckled, slapping Jack on the shoulder. "Let's just hope this mission goes a little smoother than our last one." The team boarded a captured Cardassian ship, the perfect disguise for infiltrating Zorgon space. As the ship lifted off, Derek felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the mission that could turn the tide of the war. The interior of the facility was a maze of corridors and laboratories, filled with strange alien technology. Derek and his team moved silently, their weapons at the ready, as they searched for the plans to the Zorgon weapons. Suddenly Jack's voice crackled over the comm. "I found something, Derek. You need to see this." Derek hurried to Jack's location, a dimly lit laboratory deep within the facility. Inside, he found Jack hunched over a holographic display, his face pale. "It's not just weapons, Derek," Jack said, his voice shaking. "The Zorgons are planning to betray the Cardassians. They're going to use the conquered human territories as a staging ground for an invasion of the Cardassian Empire." Derek's blood ran cold. The Zorgons were playing a dangerous game, one that could plunge the entire galaxy into chaos. He downloaded the plans for the weapons and the evidence of the Zorgons' betrayal onto a data drive. "We need to get this information back to the UEF," he said, his voice urgent. "Let's move." But as they turned to leave, the doors to the laboratory slid open, revealing a group of Zorgon soldiers led by a towering figure in black armor, Commander Zaxxas, the brilliant and ruthless leader of the Zorgon military. "Well, well," Zaxxas said, his voice a guttural snarl. "What do we have here, a group of Cardassian spies, perhaps?" Derek raised his plasma rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger. "We're leaving with these plans, Zaxxas. Stand aside." Zaxxas laughed, a harsh grating sound. "I think not, human. You've seen too much. Now you will die." The Zorgon soldiers opened fire, plasma bolts filling the air. Derek and his team dove for cover, returning fire with deadly precision. The laboratory erupted into a fierce battle, the two sides trading blows amidst the shattered equipment and flickering holo displays. Derek saw an opening and took it, leading his team in a desperate charge towards the exit. They fought their way through the Zorgon soldiers, plasma bolts sizzling past their heads. But as they neared the airlock, Derek saw Zaxxas aim a strange device at their ship. "Derek," Jack shouted, his voice filled with alarm. "He's planted a tracking device on our ship." Derek cursed, his mind racing. They couldn't lead the Zorgons back to Earth, not with the stolen plans in their possession. But as the airlock doors sealed behind them and they raced towards their ship, he knew they had no choice. As the ship blasted away from the facility, Derek could see Zorgon fighters launching in pursuit, their alien engines screaming through the void. He gripped the controls, his knuckles white, as he plotted a course back to UEF space. But with the Zorgons hot on their heels and time running out, Derek knew that their mission was far from over. He had to find a way to warn the UEF of the impending betrayal and deliver the stolen plans before it was too late. The fate of humanity, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested on his shoulders. As the Zorgon tracking device blinked ominously on the hull of the captured Cardassian ship, Derek's mind raced. Time was running out. He turned to his team, his voice terse but determined. "We need to split up. Jack, take the data drive with the stolen plans and head to the nearest UEF outpost at maximum warp. I'll lure the Zorgons away and buy you some time." Jack hesitated for a moment, concern etched on his battle-hardened face. "Derek, that's suicide. You can't take on the Zorgons alone." Derek clasped his friend's shoulder, a grim smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I don't plan on dying today, Jack. Now get going. That's an order." With a curt nod, Jack rushed to the scout ship's escape pod, the data drive clutched tightly in his hand. As the pod jettisoned away, Derek turned his attention to the Cardassian ship's controls. He punched in the coordinates for a heavily fortified Cardassian military installation deep in enemy territory. It was a risky gambit, but Derek knew that the Zorgons would follow him, believing he still carried the stolen plans. As the ship hurtled through the void, Derek opened a channel on all frequencies. "This is Captain Derek Johnson of the United Earth Federation. I have urgent information for the Cardassian Empire." There was a moment of tense silence. Then a gruff Cardassian voice crackled over the comm. "Speak quickly, human, before I blast you out of the sky." Derek took a deep breath. "The Zorgons are planning to betray you. They intend to use the conquered human territories as a staging ground for an invasion of your empire. I have the proof right here, stolen from a Zorgon research facility." The Cardassian commander's tone turned wary. "And why should we believe you, our sworn enemy?" "Because if you don't, the Zorgons will crush us both," Derek snapped. "I'm proposing a temporary truce. Help me fight off the Zorgons, and I'll share the stolen plans with you. Together, we can put an end to their treachery." There was a long pause. Then the Cardassian commander spoke again, his voice laced with grudging respect. "Very well, human, you have a deal. But if this is a trick, I will personally disintegrate you atom by atom." As Derek approached the Cardassian installation, a fleet of Zorgon ships dropped out of hyperspace behind him, their weapons already charging. Derek smiled grimly. The trap was set. Suddenly, a swarm of Cardassian warships emerged from behind the installation, their plasma cannons blazing. The Zorgons, caught off guard, scrambled to return fire. The void lit up with the fury of the battle, ships twisting and turning in a deadly dance. In the chaos, Derek spotted a familiar vessel, Zaxxus's flagship. With a snarl of determination, Derek steered the Cardassian ship towards it, dodging enemy fire with deft maneuvers. As he drew closer, he activated the ship's transporters, beaming himself onto the Zorgon bridge. Zaxxus spun around, his cybernetic eyes widening in surprise. "You, but how?" Derek didn't waste time with words. He charged forward, his fists flying. Zaxxus met him head-on, his enhanced strength a match for Derek's raw power. They traded blows in a brutal dance, smashing into consoles and bulkheads. Derek could feel his knuckles split, blood spattering Zaxxus's metallic face. Zaxxus pressed his advantage, his mechanical limbs moving with blinding speed. He lifted Derek off the ground, slamming him against the wall. Derek felt his ribs crack, pain lancing through his chest. Zaxxus grinned, his razor-sharp teeth gleaming. "Did you really think you could defeat me, human? I am the pinnacle of Zorgon evolution, a perfect fusion of flesh and machine. You are nothing but a relic, a throwback to a primitive age." Through the haze of pain, Derek's mind flashed to the stolen plans, to the schematics of Zorgon cybernetics he had glimpsed. With a sudden burst of inspiration, he reached out, his fingers scrabbling against Zaxxus's neural interface port. Zaxxus laughed, a harsh grating sound. "What do you hope to accomplish? You cannot possibly understand our technology." "I understand enough," Derek growled. With a final desperate effort, he ripped the interface cable free, sending a cascading failure through Zaxxus's systems. The Zorgon commander convulsed, his cybernetic limbs jerking and twitching. Derek pressed his advantage, raining down blows on Zaxxus' weakened form. With a final sickening crunch, Zaxxus crumpled to the deck, his eyes flickering and fading. Breathing heavily, Derek staggered to the flagship's communications array. He opened a channel to the UEF High Command, his voice ragged with exhaustion. "This is Captain Derek Johnson. Mission accomplished. The Zorgon commander is down and their fleet is in disarray, requesting immediate extraction." There was a burst of static, then a jubilant voice filled the bridge. "Captain Johnson, this is High Command. We copy your message. Lieutenant Harris has arrived safely with the stolen plans, and our scientists are already working to reverse engineer the Zorgon technology. You've done it, Captain. You've turned the tide of the war." Derek allowed himself a moment of relief, sagging against the console. But his respite was short-lived. Another voice cut through the celebrations, this one taut with urgency. "Captain Johnson, we have an emergency situation. The Cardassian Empire has launched a massive counterattack against both the Zorgons and the UEF. They're seeking to reclaim their lost territories and assert their dominance over the galaxy. We need you back on the front lines, immediately." Derek straightened, his jaw set with determination. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. As he beamed back to his ship, ready to face the next challenge, he knew that the fate of humanity still hung in the balance, and he would not rest until the galaxy was safe from the machinations of the Cardassians and the Zorgons alike. The human-Cardassian alliance held against the Zorgon fleet, the combined might of their ships tearing through the enemy ranks. But even as the Zorgons fell back, their ships smoldering and broken, a new threat emerged. The main Cardassian fleet, vast and terrible, dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons already primed and ready. Derek's comm crackled to life, the voice of the Cardassian commander he had so recently allied with now dripping with menace. "Did you really think we would let you keep those stolen plans, human? The Zorgon technology will be ours, and ours alone. And with it, We will crush your pathetic federation and rule the galaxy unopposed. Derek slammed his fist against the console, the betrayal stinging like a physical blow. But there was no time for anger, no time for recriminations. The Cardassians were already opening fire, their plasma beams slicing through the weakened UEF ships like a scythe through wheat. "All ships fall back to defensive positions," Derek barked into the comm. "We need to buy time for the evacuation of the nearby colonies." As the UEF fleet fought a desperate rearguard action, Derek knew that the stolen plans were now more important than ever. If the Cardassians got their hands on the Zorgon technology, it would mean the end of humanity's hopes for victory. They had to get those plans to safety, no matter the cost. The Cardassian onslaught was relentless, a tidal wave of plasma fire and death that swept across the stars. Admiral Derek Johnson watched in grim silence as colony after colony fell, their defenses crumbling under the sheer weight of the enemy assault. The remnants of the UEF fleet, battered and bloodied, could only fall back in the face of the Cardassian advance, fighting desperate rearguard actions to cover the evacuation of civilians. "Admiral, we have to do something," Captain Sarah Martinez said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "We can't just abandon those people to the Cardassians." Derek nodded, his jaw set. "We won't, I have a plan." With a ragtag fleet of UEF and Zorgon ships under his command, Derek launched a series of daring rescue missions, striking deep into Cardassian-held territory. His knowledge of the enemy's tactics and strategies, honed through years of bitter warfare, allowed him to stay one step ahead of the Cardassian forces, slipping past their defenses and snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. But the Cardassians were learning, adapting to Derek's tactics. During one particularly daring raid, Derek's fleet found itself ambushed by a massive Cardassian task force, led by none other than Admiral Karros himself. The space around the besieged colony erupted into a maelstrom of fire and death, as the two fleets clashed in a titanic struggle for supremacy. Derek gritted his teeth as his ship shuddered under the impact of enemy fire, sparks cascading from overloaded consoles. "Concentrate fire on their lead ships," he barked, his eyes locked on the tactical display. "We have to hold them off long enough for the transports to escape." But the Cardassians pressed their attack, their superior numbers and firepower taking a heavy toll on Derek's fleet. One by one, his ships fell, torn apart by the relentless barrage of plasma fire. Derek's own vessel, the UES Retribution, took a direct hit to its engines, leaving it crippled and adrift. The Retribution hit the ground hard, skidding across the rocky terrain in a shower of sparks and debris. Derek was thrown from his chair, his head slamming against the bulkhead. As darkness closed in around him, he could hear the sound of enemy ships descending, the thunder of their engines echoing through the tortured sky. When Derek awoke, he found himself in the wreckage of the Retribution, surrounded by a small group of survivors. Among them was a Zorgon scientist named Dr. Zorthal, his insectoid features creased with concern. "Admiral Johnson," Zorthal said, his voice a rasping whisper, "we must hurry. The Cardassians will be upon us soon." Derek struggled to his feet, his head pounding. "What do you suggest, Doctor?" Zorthal hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "I have been working on a secret project, a weapon that could turn the tide of this war, but it is incomplete and requires a rare element that can only be found in the heart of a dying star." Derek's eyes widened. "A dying star? That's suicide." "Perhaps," Zorthal said, "but it may be our only chance. With this weapon we could strike a blow against the Cardassians that they would never forget." Derek was silent for a long moment, his mind racing. He knew that the odds of success were slim, that the mission was all but impossible, but he also knew that the alternative was unthinkable, that the Cardassians would not rest until they had ground humanity beneath their heel. Zorthal nodded. "I have a few contacts among the Zorgon resistance. They may be able to help us." As the sound of Cardassian landing craft grew louder, Derek and his small band of survivors set out into the wilderness, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of the task that lay ahead. They had to reach the dying star, had to retrieve the element that Zorthal needed to complete his weapon. The fate of humanity itself hung in the balance, and Derek would not rest until he had seen this mission through to the end, no matter the cost. The modified Zorgon ship shuddered as Derek pushed its engines to their limits, the dying star looming ever larger in the viewscreen. Dr. Zorthal worked frantically at the navigation controls, his insectoid fingers dancing across the holographic displays. "The star's gravitational field is intensifying," Zorthal warned, his voice strained. "We must approach with caution." Derek nodded, his eyes locked on the swirling maelstrom of plasma and radiation that surrounded the star's core. "We don't have a choice. That element is our only hope of stopping the Cardassians." Suddenly the ship's proximity alarms blared, a chorus of urgent beeps and flashing lights. "Incoming hostiles," Captain Marcus Adams shouted from the tactical station. "Cardassian ships, closing fast." On the viewscreen, a fleet of sleek predatory vessels sliced through the void, their hulls glinting in the sickly light of the dying star. At their head was a massive warship, its plasma cannons already glowing with deadly energy. "Kairos?" Derek growled, his fists clenching. "He must have intercepted our transmissions. He knows what we're after." The Cardassian ships opened fire, a barrage of plasma bolts and torpedoes that rocked the Zorgon vessel to its core. Derek threw the ship into a dizzying series of evasive maneuvers, the inertial dampeners straining to compensate. "Marcus, target their weapons systems," Derek barked, his hands flying over the helm controls. "Buy us some time." Marcus complied, his fingers a blur as he unleashed a salvo of quantum torpedoes at the Cardassian fleet. The torpedoes found their mark, slamming into the enemy ships with devastating force. But the Cardassians kept coming, their shields absorbing the brunt of the damage. As Derek wove the ship through the gauntlet of enemy fire, a swarm of Cardassian drones descended upon them, their metallic carapaces glinting in the starlight. The drones latched onto the Zorgon ship's hull, boring into its armor with laser drills. "Hull breach imminent," Zorthal cried, his voice edged with panic. "We cannot sustain this damage for long." Derek gritted his teeth, his mind racing. They were so close to the star's core, so close to the element they needed. But the Cardassians were relentless, their attack unceasing. Suddenly Marcus's face appeared on the viewscreen, his expression grim. "Derek, I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." Derek's eyes widened as he realized what his friend was suggesting. "Marcus, no. There has to be another way." Marcus shook his head, a sad smile on his lips. "You know there isn't. You and Zorthal have to reach that star. The fate of humanity depends on it." With a final nod, Marcus cut the transmission. Moments later, his ship broke formation, charging headlong into the Cardassian flagship. The two vessels collided in a blinding flash of light, the shockwave rippling outward in a wave of destruction. Derek watched in horror as Marcus's ship disintegrated, consumed by the fires of the enemy's plasma cannons. But the sacrifice had not been in vain. The Cardassian flagship listed to one side, its shields flickering and failing. "Marcus," Derek whispered, his heart heavy with grief, "I won't let your death be in vain." With renewed determination, Derek plunged the Zorgon ship into the heart of the dying star. The vessel's advanced shields straining against the crushing force of the stellar matter. The viewscreen filled with a blinding white light, the ship's hull groaning under the immense pressure. And then they were through, the ship emerging into a vast chamber at the star's core. Before them, suspended in a web of shimmering energy fields, was a pulsing crystalline structure, its facets glowing with an otherworldly light. "The element," Zorthal breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. "We've found it." Derek brought the ship to a hover near the crystal, the vessel's robotic arms extending to carefully extract a small sample. But as the arms made contact, the chamber shook with a sudden impact. The Cardassians had followed them, and Kairos himself had managed to board the Zorgon ship. The airlock doors burst open, and Kairos charged into the chamber, his elite commandos at his heels. The Cardassian's eyes blazed with hatred as he leveled his plasma rifle at Derek's chest. "Did you really think you could steal from us and escape, human?" Karos snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "This ends now." Derek met Karos's gaze, his own eyes hard as flint. "You're right, Karos, this ends now." The two warriors charged at each other, their weapons forgotten as they clashed in a brutal hand-to-hand battle. They traded blows across the chamber, smashing into consoles and bulkheads with bone-crushing force. Karos was strong, his reptilian muscles rippling with power. But Derek was faster, his human reflexes giving him a split-second advantage. They were evenly matched, neither able to gain the upper hand. But as the battle raged, Zorthal saw his chance. The Zorgon scientist lunged for Karos, a glowing device in his hand. With a crackle of energy, he pressed the device against the Cardassian's neck, and Karos convulsed, his cybernetic implants overloading with a shower of sparks. Karos collapsed to the deck, his body twitching as the device's energy coursed through his nervous system. His commandos, seeing their leader fall, broke and ran, fleeing back to their own ship. Derek stood over Karos, his chest heaving with exertion. For a moment he considered ending the Cardassian's life, avenging the countless lives he had taken. But something stayed his hand. "This isn't over, Karos," Derek said, his voice low and dangerous. "We'll finish this another day." With the element secured and Karos neutralized, Derek and Zorthal raced back to UEF space, pushing the Zorgon ship to its limits. They had to complete the weapon, had to give humanity a fighting chance against the Cardassian onslaught. But as they approached the secret UEF research facility, Derek's heart sank. The facility was a smoking ruin, its walls blasted and crumbling, and in orbit above the planet, the Cardassian fleet waited, its ships poised to strike at the heart of human space itself. The final battle was about to begin, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Derek and Dr. Zorthal weaved their way through the chaos of the Cardassian attack, their ship's shields flickering under the onslaught of plasma fire. Derek's hands flew over the controls, his jaw set as he navigated the treacherous battlefield. Beside him, Dr. Zorthal worked frantically to boost the ship's cloaking device, his insectoid fingers dancing over the holographic displays. "We're almost there," Derek said through gritted teeth, as a Cardassian cruiser loomed into view, its weapons charging. "Just a little further." With a deft maneuver, Derek sent their ship spiraling past the cruiser, its cloak shimmering as it bent the light around them. The Cardassian vessel fired blindly, its shots passing harmlessly through the void. Moments later they emerged from the battle, the UEF rally point appearing on their scanners. Derek let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, relief flooding through him as he guided the ship towards the hidden base. As they touched down in the hangar bay, Derek was greeted by a sight he never thought he'd see again. Admiral John Grayson, his mentor and friend, striding towards him with a grim smile on his face. "Derek," Grayson said, clasping his hand in a firm grip, "I knew you'd make it. We've got a lot of work to do." Together they made their way to the base's command center, where Dr. Zorthal and a team of UEF scientists were already hard at work on the black hole weapon. The rare element they'd retrieved from the dying star pulsed at the heart of the device, its eerie glow casting shadows on the faces of the scientists. But even as they worked, the base shook with the impact of Cardassian bombardment, the enemy fleet relentless in its pursuit of the UEF forces. Derek clenched his fists, knowing that time was running out. "We need a diversion," he said, his mind racing. "Something to draw their fire away from the base." Grayson nodded, his eyes hard. "I think I know just the thing." Hours later, Derek found himself in the cockpit of a sleek black fighter, its hull shimmering with advanced cloaking technology. He'd infiltrated a Cardassian supply depot, stealing the prototype stealth ship right out from under their noses. Now as he rocketed towards the Cardassian fleet, he felt a grim sense of purpose settle over him. With the stealth fighter's advanced systems, he could strike at the enemy with impunity, hitting them where they least expected it. And strike he did, his plasma cannons tearing through Cardassian shields and hulls like paper. He darted and weaved through the enemy formations, a ghost in the void, leaving chaos and destruction in his wake. Back at the base, Dr. Zorthal and the scientists worked feverishly, the black hole weapon taking shape before their eyes. But even as they made the final adjustments, the base's sensors lit up with a new threat. A massive Cardassian fleet pouring in from the depths of space, their ships bristling with weapons. Admiral Grayson's face was grim as he turned to Derek, who had just returned from his latest raid. "We're out of time," he said, his voice heavy. "The weapon is ready, but we need to get it to the heart of their fleet." Derek met his mentor's gaze, understanding the unspoken message. This was a one-way trip, a suicide mission, but if it meant the survival of humanity, he would gladly make that sacrifice. He gathered a small team of volunteers, each one ready to lay down their lives for the cause. Dr. Zorthal met his eyes as he prepared to board the transport ship, a silent understanding passing between them. As the ship tore away from the base, Derek felt a sense of calm settle over him. He knew the odds, knew the risks, but he also knew that this was their last, best hope. The Cardassian fleet loomed before them, a wall of steel and plasma, and at its heart Derek saw a familiar ship, its hull adorned with the marks of command. Kairos. The Cardassian admiral had anticipated their plan, had laid a trap for them at the very center of his fleet. Derek's grip tightened on the controls, his eyes narrowing. This was it, the final confrontation. One way or another, this war would end today. Derek's pulse raced as he pushed his stealth fighter to its limits, weaving through the Cardassian fleet like a ghost. His team followed close behind, their ships darting in and out of the enemy's sensor range. They struck with surgical precision, targeting key systems and crippling the Cardassian ships one by one. But as they neared the heart of the fleet, a sudden jolt shook Derek's fighter. The ship's cloak flickered and died, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. "It's a trap," his wingman shouted over the comm. "They've got us in some kind of gravity well." Derek's eyes widened as he saw a swarm of Cardassian fighters descending upon them, plasma cannons blazing. His team fought back valiantly, their weapons spitting fire into the void, but they were hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned. One by one, Derek watched as his comrades fell, their ships exploding in brilliant flashes of light. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation, using their own vessels as shields to protect Derek and the precious weapon he carried. Tears stung Derek's eyes as he whispered a silent thanks to his fallen friends, but he had no time to mourn. The fate of humanity rested on his shoulders, and he would not let their deaths be in vain. With a snarl of defiance, Derek punched his thrusters to full power, rocketing towards the Cardassian flagship. Plasma bolts sizzled past his cockpit, the enemy fighters swarming like angry hornets. But Derek was too fast, too skilled. He dodged and weaved, his fingers flying over the controls as he returned fire. Suddenly, a familiar ship dropped out of warp directly in front of him. It was Kairos, his personal fighter bristling with advanced weapons. Derek's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the sleek, predatory lines of the Cardassian craft. The two fighters clashed in a dizzying dance of death, their weapons flashing like lightning in the void. They spun and twisted, each trying to gain the upper hand. Derek gritted his teeth as he felt the G-forces crushing him into his seat, his vision blurring at the edges. Kairos matched him move for move, his ship's superior technology keeping him one step ahead. Derek's shields buckled under the onslaught, warning alarms blaring in his ears. It seemed that the Cardassian had finally outmatched him. With a sudden twist of the controls, Derek wrenched his ship into a corkscrew dive, barreling straight towards Kairos. The Cardassian, caught off guard, tried to evade, but it was too late. Derek's plasma cannons found their mark, piercing the weak point in Kairos's shields, and sending the enemy fighter spiraling out of control. Derek didn't waste a moment. With Kairos's ship disabled, he rocketed towards the Cardassian flagship, bobbing and weaving through a hailstorm of anti-fighter fire. His ship shuddered as debris from the battle pounded against his hull, but he pushed forward, his eyes locked on his target. As he neared the optimal firing position, Derek's finger hovered over the weapon's activation switch. He hesitated, knowing that the moment he pressed that button, he would be sealing his own fate along with the Cardassians. But there was no other choice. The survival of the human race depended on him. With a deep breath and a final prayer, Derek activated the black hole weapon. At first nothing seemed to happen. Then a pinprick of darkness appeared in the heart of the Cardassian fleet, a tiny speck of absolute black against the stars. It grew rapidly, hungrily, devouring everything in its path. Ships, debris, even the light itself seemed to vanish into its insatiable maw. Derek watched in awe and terror as the singularity expanded, knowing that in mere moments it would consume him too. He closed his eyes, picturing the faces of his loved ones, of his comrades who had given their lives for this moment. "I'm sorry," he whispered, as the darkness rushed up to embrace him. "I wish there was another way." You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.